Welcome, everybody. It is my pleasure to introduce Jack Child, who is the Assistant Vice Principal for Teaching and Learning at Minerva Virtual Academy, a pioneering institution in online education. As a founding member of the Academy, Jack has been instrumental in shaping its virtual learning environment and pedagogical strategy, helping to define what effective digital education could and should look like. With a background as a science teacher and a deep expertise in alternative education, Jack has worked closely with a diverse range of learners through online schools, homeschooling networks, and elite sports clubs. Sounds pretty cool. His commitment to student-centered, flexible learning has positioned him as a respected voice in the evolution of modern education. Jack's works reflects a forward-thinking approach that meets students where they are and empowers them to thrive in a non-traditional settings. It is our pleasure to welcome you, Jack. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Fred, and thank you for everyone for joining today, whatever time it is here in the world. For me, it's in the evening. I nearly said evening, but I know people are coming from all over, which is obviously fantastic. So yeah, as Fred says there, I'm a founding member of Minerva's Virtual Academy. I'm here to tell you a little bit more about the history of Minerva's Virtual Academy, but then our approach to teaching and how that differs from perhaps other online schools that you've been familiar with before, and then what we really do in our live lessons, how we get that teaching across. We use a flipped learning model, which we'll talk a bit more about later on in this session, and of course, as part of that, we use BigBlueButton for our live lessons as well, and don't just use it for the live lessons, but actually are able to pull a lot of data from those live lessons that we follow up with students on afterwards too. So hoping to tell you a little bit more about this. As Fred alluded to there, my background has always been in alternative education, and in fact the company's background has always been in alternative education. So the company kind of branched off from its sister company, which started earlier to the school. It started up in 2014. It's Minerva Tutors, and they offer after school tuition, but also summer clubs and homeschooling. It was set up by our CEO, Hugh Viney, who you can see in the blue picture and blue t-shirt and glasses in the picture there. You will also see a much younger me in the far left of the picture, sat right at the back there as well. This was one of our tutor breakfasts where some of the head tutors of Minerva Tutors would get together and kind of discuss approaches to the ways that we were teaching things and do some training as well. Minerva Tutors offered one-to-one tuition, not group tuition, and so when it came to 2020, the idea for Minerva's Virtual Academy was sort of born, where there was a need to service a selection of students who homeschooling is the best option for one reason or another, but the cost that's associated with one-to-one tuition every single hour of the week is just too high, or they wanted something that had more of a social approach to schooling and wanted to still retain that aspect of being around other students as well. So in terms of where Minerva Tutors still exists as a sister company, but MVA really came from that, and from that desire to offer something to those profile of students. And we started it up in November 2020. We had 4 students when we first started. It soon grew to 11, and I remember from that mix we had at the beginning, it was a really varied mix. We had a couple of my early students, one had physical disability, which meant schooling from home just benefited them. It was a lot easier on their day. They would get less tired because they weren't moving around corridors constantly. They were just set put in their setup. I had another family, it was a brother and sister who traveled around the world, and we as an online school could just travel around in their rucksack with them. And I also had an athlete who was an Olympic hopeful. He was a fencer, or still is a fencer. Yeah, he wanted to do his training within the school day because he could only book the facilities at certain times, and so schooling was really clashing with that, and he'd previously just had to miss his physical school, miss his lessons, and wasn't then able to, we found it very difficult to catch up. He was a really, really bright academic student, but even found it difficult when he missed things. So being with an online school meant that He could log into his lessons at his fencing club. He could fit the virtual learning platform work that we'll talk about in a second around his sporting commitments as well. And those 11 students that we started off with now have grown and grown over the last 5 years. And we're now approaching 1,200 students at the school. So much, much bigger. I always joke that it was easier with 11 students, but actually with some of the processes we've set up and some of the ways we do it, actually the scale, even though we are a much bigger school, is still very manageable because of the tech that we kind of make use of here as well. And really the essence of this school was realizing that, you know, even though online school isn't the right option for every child, it is important for it to be an option for every child. I was always think of when I was growing up at school, I loved school. I think most people who become a teacher loved school in one way or another. It's why we then continued on doing it. But I love physical school. I liked seeing my friends. I liked the physical education and playing football and in the break time and those sorts of things. But I knew I had friends, I had people at my school that I knew would probably have benefited from an alternative option. Maybe because they needed an environment that was a little bit more controlled, maybe because they loved the idea of self-led learning and could really knuckle down and push on ahead of the rest of the class and that type of thing. And so, as we say, it's maybe not the right option for every child, but it's important for it to be an option for those that it is. And there's a large population of students, as we've found, for who it is the perfect environment when done correctly. So a little bit more on how we do this. MVA is built on 4 pillars. I'll kind of go through each one of these step by step. The first pillar is our virtual learning platform. We use Canvas by Instructor. Some of you, well, a lot of you might be familiar with that. We have essentially set the work up in 2-week modules, making it flow really, really clearly with our second pillar of live lessons. So students will complete some pre-live lesson work. We call that the prepare and share section, because they're preparing for the lesson and sharing that they've done that prepare work before they go into the live lesson itself. When we get into the live lesson, the teacher might check for this understanding. We'll talk a bit more about the live lesson element later on, but check for this understanding and clear up any misconceptions here. We try and make our live lessons as engaging as possible, more like an active learning experience than a lecture. Again, I'll touch a bit more on that in more detail later on, exactly how we do that. But these 2 pillars sort of go hand in hand with the delivering of the content. And once we've finished off with that live lesson, there'll then be some work back on the virtual learning platform to consolidate it. And when we have new students, I'll often be running their orientation session and effectively describe it as a sandwich. And I find that even when talking to adults, describing it as a sandwich works, where your bread is your virtual learning platform work and your live lesson is the filling that goes in between. And we have that for each of our subjects throughout the week there as well. What makes us stand out and different to a lot of other online schools is every student has a mentor. They meet with this mentor one-to-one for 30 minutes every single week. The mentor is their first point of call as well. So there may be other meetings in the week that they attend with the mentor, or they reach out to the mentor for support and for help. And this isn't just a check-in of academics. It's a check-in of how's life going in general. You know, I've had mentees in the past. We spoke about one of them earlier, the fencer. I'd loved talking to him about the first sort of 10 minutes, the mentor session, just talking about what his week's been like, what he's been doing in his sports, because that was so central to his life. It was also so central to his mood and could sometimes impact his work at school. And that, you know, if he was at a physical school, and something had happened within his sport and that was cascading his day, they might be less understanding or less aware of that sort of thing. But having those conversations with young people and sort of putting them first, making them feel heard and offering advice where we can as well, is a really, really important part of our model. We've also got the community enrichment part that makes us stand out from other online providers in that we see ourselves as everything that a physical school can offer just online, rather than an online school that does things in a different way. So we still run school trips. I was on one last week. It was our year 11 celebration. They've just finished their end of year exams, and so they got the option to go karting or a cat cafe in the day, and we had 2 groups going to either, and then after that we all got together and had a silent disco kind of buffet style party type thing. So we still have that social side of things and try and run school trips as often as we can for individual year groups, and equally spread them around the country. So we've had a lot spread around the UK. About 75-80% of our student body are UK based, but lots fly into the UK. If we base a trip in London, it gives students across the world the chance to fly in. We had actually at the year 11 celebration someone fly in from Taiwan. We've had students fly in from Ghana, Canada before, to attend these school trips and really make a trip of it with their families as well, but essentially to see the friends in person that they've made online. There are other elements to the community as well. We run social rooms with the students at regular points throughout the week, which kind of act as like recess break time type of thing, and it allows them to play online games. It allows them to go into breakout rooms and chat, those sorts of things as well. We have clubs, after school clubs. We've got baking club, chess club, we've got an AI club, all sorts of clubs, art clubs, you name it. We've probably run a club on it as well. So that community element is even more important, I'd say, than if we were a physical school, and we encourage students to get involved with those just as much as we do with the academic work as well. So yeah, a little bit more detail on that academic work. As we say, that the mentor is checking in with the student, but they're also overseeing that this academic work is done, the work on the virtual learning platform is done. So we like to feed a lot of information through to those mentors so that they can have the conversations with the young people and keep them on track and report back home to parents as well. So this is our flipped learning model. I spoke a bit about it being a sandwich before. We split it into 2-week chunks. I've chosen our year 9 to 11 kind of standard subject model for this. As you see along the top row in the week A, we've got the live lesson sitting in the middle. Before, we've got this section we mentioned earlier called prepare and share, preparing them for the lesson, giving them, I teach science, I tend to use science examples, but maybe giving them key terms, key words, those sorts of things to introduce the topic. And essentially, what that does for me as the teacher is it means that in the live lesson, I've got more time to cover the content that is more challenging and that they're going to find more challenging. You know, I don't want to be going over this is what this word means when they can read it for themselves beforehand. What I did in one of my lessons today is we were doing a chemistry lesson on some of the equations that are used in chemistry. And this tends to be something that students just don't like. I can make explosions really interesting, exciting. I can even make some of the slower reactions quite exciting. I can make the maths exciting, but it's a bit more of a stretch to get them on that journey to do so. But what it meant is that because I'd given them the formula beforehand, because I'd given them some easier questions to work on beforehand, we weren't wasting time with that. All of them were ready to go with the more challenging topics, challenging questions, and push that little bit further. And we'll see a little bit later how this approach has been successful for us. After this live lesson, they then go on to build and develop the skills, and we try and get them to leave a bit of a gap between the end of this live lesson and then coming back to the virtual learning platform, maybe the gap of 24 hours, maybe a little bit more, 2 days, so that they're not just keeping it in their short-term memory, they're having to reach back and build stronger connections in their long-term memory to really consolidate this information. We call that section the build and develop section in week A. Slightly different in week B, where we've got a develop task, but also a submit task. And our submit tasks are our key tasks for tracking here. They're the task that comes at the end of this module and that says, yes, I can definitely say if I've completed this task, I've understood everything in this 2-week period as well. And so the information on that, once marked, will get sent to the mentor who can track that. The teachers can track it, and of course the parents get reported back at regular points throughout the year on this information here as well. And as a mentor, I might spot that a student should be a little bit further ahead with the subject than they are, and so might talk to them and help them schedule in time to do that during our mentor sessions as well. So we spoke about these 4 pillars that we see, and this is where you really start to see that they do go hand in hand. One doesn't really work with the other. If we were trying to do big lecture style lessons with 100, 200 students in a classroom where they're not getting a say, they're not getting to ask questions, they're not getting to work on the more difficult stuff, they're not going to be engaged in online learning with that. So yeah. And speaking of being engaged in online learning, I wanted to give you a little bit more information as to what our lessons look like. Obviously, BigBlueButton's at the center of that. We host our lessons using BigBlueButton, and so make use of a lot of the tools within there, the polls, the public and private chat, the whiteboard, all of those sorts of things are kind of fundamental to our lessons. In fact, it seems weird now talking in BigBlueButton and not be running polls at the same time, not be asking questions to be answered in the chat, because that's what we're so used to. I wouldn't normally go more than 5-10 minutes without doing that, just to make sure that I've still got everyone's attention and everyone's understanding with something. But we also use a lot of other tools, a lot of educational tools and tech to kind of support this. So again, there'll be names of things that you've heard up there, but just to run through a few, we use Seneca, which is an online quizzing platform. We use that on our virtual learning platform and in live lessons. Kahoot. I always think that students can get bored of Kahoot. It's kind of like a game show. You're turning educational questions into a game show. I always think they could get bored of it because we use it quite a lot, but we use it quite a lot because they love it and never seem to get bored of it as well. In the top right, I've got an example of one of the visualizer type tools that we'd use in art. They might use it to show brush strokes and to show, I've never been particularly arty, but to show how they're doing something in art. I'm more sciencey in science. In fact, on my desk earlier on, I was doing a lesson on essentially whether we could create the next Jurassic Park and how close science is to actually making a real life Jurassic Park. So I have a fossil that I did have my visualizer plugged in and zoomed in on. I have it right in front of me now. So we use those sorts of things. But the idea is with an online lesson, you are competing with a world of distractions. If they open another tab, they've got the internet, they've got absolutely everything they could possibly wish for. Equally, I'm looking around on my desk now. I've just picked up a fossil, for example. I've got so many things I could fiddle around with and be distracted from. So it's really, really important that we have them as active learners. We have them getting involved with the lessons themselves and engaging, whether that is using the microphone, whether that is using the chats, just answering the polls, taking part in any of these activities that we see here as well. It's just so important to what we do. And it's an expectation that we set of the students. Because we're an online school, we have a varied range of students, and we do expect them all to engage, but depending on their circumstances might depend on how they engage. So that's why we like to provide multiple ways for them to take part. Some might not be confident to put their hand up and speak out loud on the microphone, but they might all be confident to put something in the private chat or answer a poll anonymously as well. And the really key thing with this is that our live lesson then leads back into that virtual learning platform work as well, and that students should leave the lesson knowing what they're going to be doing next, but also knowing that they can do that task that they're going to be doing next as well. And as I say, we don't just use the lessons for checking understanding and working on that more difficult stuff. We also use it to track data and to send that data back to the mentor. Again, the mentor is the center point for each student. They know everything about that student's circumstances. They're communicating back with home every 2 weeks with a mentor report. And this is something that we include in our mentor area, so mentors can add it to the report itself. And it's actually taking engagement data from BigBlueButton and categorizing it into our context. So we put it into a bar graph here. We've got 4 different levels: level 0, 1, 2, and 3. Level 0 fits into the box of no engagement shown in a live lesson, where maybe they're not answering the polls, they're not answering the things in the chat or putting their hand up to say something out loud. That would be a bit of a red flag or a flag for a mentor to have a conversation with the mentee to make sure that they are getting more involved in these important live lessons. Level 1 is that, yes, they've got involved in a poll, they've got involved in one chat message maybe. Level 2 would be 5 or more chats/polls, and level 3 is they've used the microphone, they've engaged in that way. And you see this is an example of a student who's regularly in their lessons each week hitting that level 3 several times across this. So what this is allowing us to do as mentors is to set our students goals and track that they're doing those goals, not just to do with completing academic work, but getting involved in live lessons, which again, there might be students that come to us that just feel they've had their confidence knocked at previous school. It might be really small steps to build up to that level 1 engagement, and then the level 2, then the level 3. But there's steps that we can track and work with them on as well. So yeah, that's our approach to online learning. And then I wanted to share a slide that's sort of how we are confident that what we've been doing has been successful in capacities as well. So as I've said before, online school isn't for every child, but it needs to be an option for every student, because for some students it is the perfect option. A great example of this is in the bottom right. There's a news article about our GCSE results last year, where in our international GCSE results, which are the exams sat when students are 15 or 16, a student at our school achieved the highest score in the world in maths, because they just really connected with the way that we were teaching. They were learning, they liked the self-led element, they really went on to thrive and have gone on to great successes even after this result as well. Another thing I like to point out is our Ofsted report. We had Ofsted visit us which is the board by the Department for Education in the UK. The first thing they said in their report was that well-being is at the heart of everything Minerva Virtual Academy do. And again, brilliant, because as you see with the pillars, one of our real big focuses is checking in on students and making sure that students are happy at the school as well. We kind of see that as the first step, and then achieving these high grades comes after that. But that's the first thing to have in place as well. Actually, hot off the press in the last week, we've also been nominated and the first UK school to be named as a finalist for the world's best school prizes as well, which obviously we're thrilled with, but it kind of goes to show that the methods that we're putting in place, the things that we are doing, is working for the students that we have as well. Brilliant. That is everything that I wanted to talk about. I'm more than happy though to field any questions that anyone has about the school or anything else that's piqued your interest in this presentation. Thank you for listening.
Jack, that was brilliant. So for those that are here, yes, please take a moment, ask Jack some questions. Very insightful about how Minerva has been approaching learning online. You wouldn't have seen any of that during COVID for sure. And it feels like the students are really benefiting from the way you approach it. There was a question from Ray. Okay, actually, Ray, let me take this one. What hosting plan do you use with BigBlueButton? So with my Blindside Networks hat on, we provide hosting for Minerva Virtual Academy, and we have adapted it to some of their processes. We share some data about the interaction with students with them. So that's where some of the reports come from. And we feel like we're a partner in trying to help them achieve their goals for delivering really high quality online. So yeah, BigBlueButton's open source. There may be schools in the world that host their own servers, but yeah, we try to help out Minerva as much as we can. I see Mara has a question there, Jack.
Yeah, so it's how to assign the matching mentor in terms of all students needing individual partnering to get their lives. Yeah, we actually take that process fairly carefully. We have several intake points, and about a week before those intake points, we get in information about the student as much as we can. In our enrollment form, we ask certain questions that might lead us to be able to pair students with the right mentor. So we have some specific mentors for specific styles of students as well. So we actually have an ex-Olympian as a mentor at the school who is perfect for our athletes coming in, who are looking to be an Olympian themselves, that it's really, really amazing that they can have the opportunity to talk to this person week on week and get their advice. The Olympian also helps run some of the sessions in our high performance club as well, which is designed at an after school club designed at the athletes. Equally, we have mentors with special educational needs training as well, that would fit with certain students coming into the school itself. Some of our teachers are mentors, so if students have a particular interest in a subject, again, as a science teacher, the mentees that I tend to get assigned now are to do with science, or as a mentor I list my hobbies, and sometimes that matches up. I love football, UK football, soccer, as people in the call might call it, and stand-up comedy. So those two things, if we have a student who might fit that, they might be paired with me off of that as well. So yeah, we kind of gather as much information as we can, and then our vice principal pastoral will do the matching there. Very
cool. I thought for a moment you were going to say there would be a sorting hat. They all stand in front of it and they get picked a mentor. Another thing that struck out to me was just the kind of different amount of time that students are expected to be in, quote, the classroom. Having gone to the traditional public school system here in Canada, I would have spent 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, sitting in class. Much of it probably wasn't, I would say honestly, much of it was more had to be there. But this seems opposite. You didn't try to replicate that model. You did something different. Tell me a little bit more about how you came down to just that amount of live class that you now provide, and why that number works out well. Yeah, absolutely. So really it comes, if we rewind back to the Minerva Tutors days, it comes a little bit from that, in that when we were working one-to-one with students, often we would use this flipped learning approach where we would give them some work to do beforehand, so that we are getting out the way some of the easier stuff that they might already know. Particularly in science, it follows on from year 7, 8, and 9 science, where a lot of the key terms you're familiar with from those sections. So you don't want them to be sat in a classroom going over things that they already know or they're not challenged by, because that's when they are going to get distracted. That's when they're going to doze off. Equally, by putting it as part on the virtual learning platform, it allows students to work at their own pace on those tasks. I always use the example with students that with maths and science, I found it came to me really easily. I could go through the content at a much quicker pace than my classmates. But when learning languages like French, Spanish, and German, it just didn't click with me. I really didn't understand it, and my class were moving faster than me, and I always felt like I was behind. But by adding in the part of the model, I suppose the asynchronous part of the model, where students are working on things on the virtual learning platform, they can adjust with their mentor their timetable to suit them, to spend more time on things that they need longer on, and less time on the things that they can speed through quite quickly as well. And with the checks for understanding, we still make sure that everyone has that understanding, but it just takes people different amounts of time to get there. So yeah, there's some of the benefits of that we found of doing it this way. A follow-up question in terms of the live time. You mentioned about you were like, hey, I don't usually talk this long without doing the polling or the whiteboard or that. Is there a sense at Minerva in terms of like, okay, we have the students for a live session, maybe it's an hour and a half. How much of that should be the instructor sort of giving instructional time, and how much of that should be the student is actually doing some applied work? Do you have like a balance, or is it intuitive? How do you kind of sort that out? It's a really good question. I think it will depend on the subject, and it will depend on the year group a little bit. But in general, we don't want them to be spending too long doing either thing. So we don't want them spending too long just listening to me talk, because again, the attention gets drifted off. If I am planning to talk for 20 minutes, I'll break it up with a few questions that I'm throwing out to the class, or a couple of polls and those sorts of things. Equally, if I'm setting them a task to be doing on their own, it's not valuable use of the time to be doing that in the live lesson. It's something that they can do on the virtual learning platform after. And again, actually leading back to the previous question, when I was sat in physical school, part of my lesson, good chunk, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, would be sat there doing independent work, and the teacher would be at their desk, maybe popping around and seeing everyone's getting on with it. But
I didn't need to be in that classroom to understand that. So we don't like to do a long 20-minute task in that same way. But again, it might be a 5-minute question by question. We do a question together, then talk, then they might do one independently, but then we talk through it as a group, get different people's thoughts and opinions on it, rather than sitting in silence for longer periods of time. So yeah, I'd say the key thing about it is short chunks, and I suppose it's a little bit like the way that social media is going to really grab our attention now. You know, it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter with TikTok, Instagram Reels and things like that. Our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter as humans, and I suppose education sort of needs to adapt to that and work with that as well.
Wow. Very impressive, Jack. And all of this within only 5 years now of a school. And I think it's probably worthwhile. Like, I think you teach grades 7 to 12, or like there's a certain range.
Yeah, we do. So yeah, the UK system, it's years 7 to year 13. So it kind of ages 11 to ages 18. Yeah.
This is fantastic, Jack. I don't think if anyone else has any questions, please ask, but it really has provided, I think, everybody here, and hopefully anyone listening to this recording, a window into what could be possible in an online education that doesn't have to be, or never was, second class. It was just probably not taught that very well during COVID. But when you have really engaged instructors, a structure that, you know, works to the student's schedule, the mentorship is, God, I wish I had half-hour mentor a week, you know, when I was in my junior high and high school here in Canada. And just the quality of education that you're providing, I think it all adds up to where these, you know, the awards that you're showing are just a result of the work that you're doing. And it's sort of like, you know, grown to 1,000. I can see no end in sight with this quality of pedagogy and delivery. So thank you again for joining with us and sharing your experiences.
Well, no, thank you so much for having me.